Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Amanda Potter. I'm the Curator of Education and Interpretation at the Zimmerli Art Museum at Rutgers University. We're really glad to have you here for today's inaugural Art Before/After Hours, our program that we are really delighted to partner with Rutgers Global on. It's now my pleasure to turn things over to Donna Gustafson, Interim Director of the Zimmerli Art Museum, and Rick Lee, Director of Global Programs and Partnerships at Rutgers Global, to kick off today's program.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the Zimmerli Art Museum's Digital Art Before, Art After Hours. This is our first digital version of a very popular program that we've been doing at the museum for many years. The museum, as you can see, is located on the corner of George and Hamilton Street on the College Avenue campus. And while I'm sorry that I can't welcome you to the museum physically, I am happy to welcome you to the museum digitally. This is the exterior view with the stairway up to the museum. I want to also thank Rick Lee and his team at Rutgers Global for partnering with us on this event. I also want to thank at the museum Amanda Potter, Nicole Simpson, Austin Losada, and Hannah Shaw, who will all be part of the program tonight. And especially I want to thank our special guest, Mary Nucci. So if we go to the next slide, the Zimmerli Art Museum is the University Art Museum. It is a museum that's 50 years old. We have 3 collecting specialties. One is American, and I'm showing you the American Gallery. And next slide. One is European, with a specialty in 19th century French art. And this is a view of our European galleries. And the third collecting specialty of the museum is Russian and Soviet nonconformist art. And this is a view of the gallery of the Dodge collection, which is Soviet nonconformist art. We also have special exhibitions every semester. This semester we have an exhibition called Everyday Soviet, Soviet Industrial Design and Nonconformist Art from 1959 to 1989. And this is an installation view of the gallery as it looks today. And when you come to campus, I hope next fall, the fall of 2021, you'll see an exhibition that we're putting together right now, which is called Angela Davis Sees the Time. And it's an exhibition that really focuses on an American icon, Angela Davis, who is known for her work for prison abolition, for her work for in intersectional feminism, and also as a person who became a worldwide personality phenomenon for her battle against the American state in 1970 and 1971. So I look forward to seeing you. I hope next year welcoming you to the museum, and enjoy your event today. Thank you very much.
Good morning and good evening, everyone. My name is Rick Lee. I'm the Director of Global Programs and Partnerships at Rutgers Global, the university's Central International Office. Rutgers Global is really delighted to be collaborating with the Zimmerli Art Museum on today's program, Art Before and Art After Hours. I know you're all here for our wonderful program on the natural world in the Anthropocene, but I would like to take this opportunity to share some current and upcoming programs offered by Rutgers Global. So on the first slide, you see here our program called the International Buddy Program, where we pair up Rutgers international and domestic students with similar interests and hobbies. So if you are a student or you know of any Rutgers students, please encourage them to sign up for this program. Next slide, please. We also have a RU Global at Home, where we've gathered an inventory of virtual experiences to enjoy from your home. And these include language learning opportunities, museum tours, performance and films. And again, we would encourage you to stop by and and check out some of the resources. Next slide, please. And finally, I want to share with you our signature program, Friendship Fridays. It's a weekly virtual pop-up lounge that is open to all Rutgers students. And each week there is a different theme. This Friday, we have another collaboration with the Zimmerli, featuring an art class with Wes Sherman. And other activities include game night and international scavenger hunt and more. These activities are offered twice on every Friday from 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time and from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Again, we encourage you and other students to join us on Fridays. Thank you again for joining us this morning. I would like to turn things back to Amanda Potter.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you, Donna. There's a lot of wonderful things happening around the university despite our separation. And so I hope that this is a way that we can kind of keep connected all around the world, really, which is one of the reasons we were so excited to partner with Rutgers Global today. So today our focus is our exhibition, It Makes Me Think of That Awful Day, The Natural World in the Anthropocene. This is a show that opened, earlier this year, 2020, and was curated by two Rutgers affiliates. So Austin Losada, who is a Rutgers graduate with his undergrad, and Hannah Shaw, who is a PhD candidate, and you will hear from them both a little bit later in the program. But Austin put together a wonderful video tour of the show, and that was done in partnership with Connor Reese, who is the digital media assistant at Rutgers Global, and we want to thank him for his outstanding work in putting this video together. So I'm going to start that up. And then we'll have a Q&A.
Hello, my name is Austin Losada, and I am the Andrew W. Mellon postgraduate intern at the Zimmerli Art Museum. Since we are not allowing visitors in our museum currently, I wanted to take you on a virtual tour of our exhibition titled, It Makes Me Think of That Awful Day, The Natural World in the Anthropocene. This exhibition brings together several works by contemporary artists that use the natural world as a source of inspiration and as a means in which they try to understand humankind's place within it. Some artists reference the problems of a specific location, like the fragile ecosystem of the El Yunque rainforest in Puerto Rico, while others combine synthetic materials and natural motifs to make a broader environmental critique. While artists of all centuries have represented nature as a vehicle to talk about or avoid the perils of industrialization and environmental degradation, these artworks grapple and envision our current world, defined by rapid climate change, mass extinction, and ecological shifts brought on by the burning of fossil fuels and disruptive development. These realities have led some to term our current geological epoch the Anthropocene, or Age of Man, and the works featured in this exhibition suggest that there is no such thing as an untouched, unmediated natural world. The title of the exhibition comes from this 2011 lithograph titled, It Makes Me Think of That Awful Day on the Island by Walton Ford. The title references the 1933 Hollywood classic King Kong, in which a film crew captures the eponymous giant gorilla on an island and brings him back to New York. Rather than depicting Kong as the frightful monster menacing a beautiful starlit scene in the film, Ford depicts Kong in the middle of a tearful cry, beset by romantic rejection and the loss of his island home. Such subversions are frequently found in Ford's work, as he is known for skillfully employing a style reminiscent of 19th century naturalists who use detailed drawings of organisms to classify, understand, and control the natural world. In opposition to his predecessors, this print offers an empathetic perspective of a grief-filled Kong due to the destruction and greed of man. Ford's print is one of 8 works belonging to the Social Environmental Aesthetics portfolio by Exit Art. The works in this portfolio are dedicated to the El Yunque National Rainforest in Puerto Rico, the only rainforest in North America. A protected region with tremendous biodiversity, El Yunque is also home to many endangered species, including the iguaca, a parrot native to the island. Iguaca by Alex Rockman represents the parrot in a striking neon orange, isolated in the composition, sitting on a severed branch and backdropped by nothing but the white paper the subject is printed on. Through this presentation, Rockman draws attention to the iguaca's dire situation as it faces extinction and loss of habitat. Both Ford's and Rockman's approach to representing melancholy and loss are notable ways that artists interpret and tackle the themes of our current ecological moment. Yet other artists, like the Boyle family, offer a detached exploration of the new forms and materials that emerge from our human-centric environment. In Cobble's study with tire tracks, earth, stones, and glass from 1976, the Boyle family recreates a familiar fragment from everyday life that often goes unnoticed. Upon first glance, the work convinces the viewer that they are looking at an actual excavated section of the earth, depicting a low-relief brick path at the lower left of the composition, tire tracks at the upper right, and shards of glass, fragments of rocks, and pieces of metal scattered on its surface throughout. In actuality, the work is primarily made of resin and fiberglass, containing only several mixed media elements. Rather than reshaping the world to fit into a specific style, the Boyle family strives to present the Earth as it is. In doing so, the ground that Cobble's study replicates is an actual location, a lorry park or truck stop, where the mark of human intervention is undeniably present. Using synthetic materials, their work calls to mind the layers of pressurized, non-biodegradable plastics that are slowly forming a new sedentary layer for the Earth. Although the Boyle family do not view their work as an environmental critique, viewing it in this context complicates artists' representations of the natural world. Similar to the site-specific approach of the Boyle family's work, Robert Loeb's Angel from 1988 emerged from his direct experience in nature. Just as 19th century artists trekked through and painted the landscapes along the Hudson River, Angel replicates a severed tree trunk and a large slab of shale that the artist encountered during a hike near White Lake in upstate New York. Using sheets of manufactured aluminum, Loeb encases his subject and captures their shape, surface, and texture using pneumatic tools, a technique known as repoussé. The result is a hollowed-out wall relief that relocates the skin of the tree and shale into the gallery space. Like the Boyle family, Loeb's use of manufactured materials underscores the way that our personal encounters with nature are marked by recontextualization as much as rapid industrial progress. And while the Boyle family and Loeb created their works from personal encounters with the environment around them, for the average person, our experience of or knowledge about nature's devastation often occurs at a distance. On August 5, 2010, roughly 1/4 of the tongue of the Petermann Glacier, which runs along Greenland's northwestern coast, broke off and floated into the sea. Its loss signaled dramatic change, alarming scientists monitoring global warming. The images of this event captured by NASA satellites made the impact of climate change visible to a wider audience, and Diane Burko, herself unnerved at the scale of the loss, modeled her painting on a published image of the event. Part of her long-running series, The Politics of Snow, this painting used satellite imagery as the model for its composition, and with its mesmerizing composition imbued with vivid colors and drama, Burko effectively short-circuits the impulse to turn away from climate catastrophe. The photographer Edward Burtynsky is well known for his captivating large-format works depicting landscapes affected by industrialization. Bertinsky's Carrera Marble Quarries, number 21, from 1993, provides a strikingly beautiful view of the damage left by our ceaseless demand for natural resources. This quarry in Carrara, Italy, is known as a source of marble used by Renaissance architects and sculptors, and despite its illustrious uses throughout history, are now commonly used for the backsplashes, floors, and countertops of homes throughout the world. In this work, Bertinsky zooms in on the sharp geometries and varied textures of the Carrara marble, inviting the viewer to consider how the extractive process itself creates a kind of sculpture. Represented by two sculptures in this exhibition, Christie Rupp's spill and turtle skeleton offer pointed commentary on the environmental devastation caused by offshore oil drilling and the acceleration of species extinction due to human consumption and development. For Spill, Rupp transforms a discarded oil barrel into a giant shell. Displayed like a rare treasure in a natural history museum, Spill's lighthearted premise quickly gives way to the reality of oil spill disasters that devastate entire marine ecosystems. The renowned art critic Lucy R. Lepard offered a keen insight into Rupp's unique approach, saying, quote, "On the initial encounter, Rupp's sculptures are attractively endearing. On second glance, they're often grisly, even tragic. Beneath her humor lurks a knowledgeable and enduring anger at the loss or rejections of so many gifts from nature," unquote. This is certainly true of Spill and Turtle Skeleton, the latter of which belongs to a body of work that features animal fossils and skeletons. In one related series, she uses the bones of chickens served at fast food restaurants to create intricate paleontology models of extinct and endangered birds. For Turtle Skeleton, Rupp molded the subject from clay, yet her attention to detail, like the animal's long nails for example, lends the skeleton a visceral realism. This play with authenticity adds pathos to its somber message. While the term Anthropocene is flawed, for example, it implies that all people are equally responsible for the current crisis, the overarching idea of a new set of environmental realities resonates with many artists. And while artists have long trained their eyes on the natural world, now more than ever, the arts can represent the perceptible impressions we are leaving on the environment. Thank you so much for coming on this tour with me, and I look forward to seeing you all at the Zimmerli Art Museum in the near future.
Thank you again, Austin and Connor, for putting together that wonderful video. Joining us now to offer a reflection on the exhibition from her academic, disciplinary-based perspective is Dr. Mary Nucci. Dr. Nucci is Assistant Dean of Community Engagement and a professor in the Department of Human Ecology within Rutgers School of Environmental and Biological Sciences. She has an AB in Biological Sciences from Mount Holyoke College, an MS in Zoology, and a PhD in Media Studies, both from Rutgers University. Her doctoral research focused on the role of the visual format, rhetoric, and culture in science communication. And her current research interests include public perception of science and science communication in film, media, and museums, which make her ideally poised to reflect on this exhibition. Please join me in welcoming Mary.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and thank you to the Zimmerli and the sponsors of this fantastic exhibition. So Austin's talk was just incredibly superlative in discussing what the images or what the art of this exhibition is trying to tell people, but what I'm going to talk about today is just a little bit of Why should we care about art when we're talking about the Anthropocene or climate change or global warming or however you'd like to describe it? So we could have the next slide, please. So from my perspective as a human ecologist, we focus in my department on this relationship of the human to the natural, social, and built environment. So we're concerned about questions of how we have influenced the natural world and how the natural world influence us as well. So art and imagery is very critical. Could I have the next slide, please? Because the way in which we've typically have seen the Anthropocene is through data visualizations, these complex images. Here's the hockey stick model of Mann et al. And climate models, which really, as a science communicator, can confuse us as well as not really display what are the concerns we should have about our behaviors and our actions as regards the natural world. Next slide. So I like to think of art and images as kind of like this story of the elephant and the blind man, that every person who comes to an image takes away a different meaning. And that's because images are polysemic. They have multiple meanings based on what we particularly bring to that particular artwork. So if you had never seen King Kong, for example, you might not have understood the reference to the title of this exhibition, which is It Makes Me Think of That Awful Day on the Island. And you'll take a different meaning away from it. But that doesn't mean that King Kong is necessary for you to understand what the art is trying to tell you, because art tells stories. It tells stories that someone is communicating a concern or a question or just wants to make you feel something, and they make meaning. So we go to look at art to make meaning for the world around us. Next slide, please. And one of the ways that we need to think about the role of images in helping us understand the world is that images, and in this case we're talking about art, but we can be talking about any kind of image. It has this power to engage with us emotionally. We have an effective response to an image we see. Sometimes positive, sometimes negative, and sometimes nothing at all. And that's partially based on the fact that our human brain has two ways it processes information. So as a biologist, I tend to come from a little bit of a biologic perspective when I'm thinking about the way we communicate through images. And we can process cognitively. We think about it. Typically, that's going to be more words than images, but we also process experientially, which is much faster and it's holistic. And when we look at an image, we take something away from it based on what we already know. And this is where you get into this polysemic nature of art. But we take something away from it. We connect it to other experiences we've had in our life. And then we make memories from those images. So images really can impact you in ways that words cannot impact you. And that's why art, especially if we're talking about the role of the human in the natural world and what we are doing and have done to the world, is really critical. Art helps us understand a complex topic, such as climate change, global warming, and what the Anthropocene is or is not, because we're still questioning whether the Anthropocene is an actual epoch right now, but let's go with that it is an actual epoch. Art helps us come to grapple with what is happening in the world around us. So I'm going to give you an example. So the next slide, please. So if I asked you what this meant, most likely many of you already had somewhat either potentially a visceral reaction to this. You see people with masks, you think of COVID, you think of people being sick, you think of the stress you're having with the world around you right now as we're dealing and grappling with this pandemic. Next slide. But if I actually tell you that this picture was taken in 2014 in Beijing due to pollution, you might take a different meaning away from it. So you've connected this image to something in your life prior to my telling you when the picture was taken. And now that I tell you when this picture was taken, you're now thinking about this image probably in very different ways than you had prior. Next slide. And that's because images shape our perspective of the world around us. These are all images that are really about the Anthropocene. Yet they don't necessarily tell the story that either they is the story of the image, or they're telling a story that someone is trying to have us see. So at the upper right are the shots from during this COVID time that became viral of dolphins in the Venice Canal, how the canals in Venice have become very clear. We know that was faked. The image in the center, I'm sure some of you saw that and kind of didn't want to look at it, but this is an endangered species. This is a particular spider that is endangered. And we don't like to think about the fact that we're endangering not just these charismatic species such as the polar bear in the upper corner, but we're endangering spiders. When we see the picture of the polar bear, we know that image went viral, and it is not a picture necessarily of climate change. It's believed by a biologist to be a picture of a dying polar bear, most likely due to cancer. If you're familiar, I'm sure you all know, with Fukushima nuclear reactor, the image at the lower left is a shot of so-called mutant daisies from Fukushima. We know that is fake as well, and that the daisies do mutate like this, but they mutate like this naturally. And the photo to the lower right is the Amazon burning. This went viral last year, but this image is actually not from the Amazon during this year, but from previous time. Now, where am I going with this? The idea is that images can shape our perspective, both positive and negatively, but regardless, these images, you carry them with you. You will take them with you, you create a memory of them, and they help you understand the world. They help you think about the world in ways perhaps you've never thought about it before. Next slide. So imagery is important, and when we think about the Anthropocene specifically, it highlights the unseen and the unknown. This shot is from 1968. It's really the first shot that we really understood the Earth in isolation. That this is from the perspective from the moon, surface of the moon. We see ourselves isolated in this black space around us, and it led us into the ecological concerns of the 60s and the 70s, and of course to the present. The fact that we can't see this, but when we see this, we suddenly have a feeling about the world around us that we've never had before. So art and images bear witness. They make things visible. They hold us accountable. If you hear about an event, you may think that's a terrible thing, but if you see the event, you may take action. It makes what's local global. If I did not know anything about other countries, if I had not seen what's happening in islands in the South Pacific, I'm not sure that you could convince me, if I was not a scientist, that climate change was real, that the Anthropocene is real, that we have had an effect on the world. But when we see people impacted by the choices we've made as human beings, it makes it local. It makes real the experiences that others have when we can see it. This is the power of art and images. Next slide. It also helps us think about the world in different ways. Going back to this idea of if we see something that's happening to other people, hopefully it creates a sense of empathy in us for what other people are dealing with. We recognize that there are human beings who have a different world than we do. And perhaps it transforms us to think about the world in a different way and our connections to each other. And at this time of global change, climate warming, we need to have that kind of transformation. This is the strength of art. It allows us to inhabit different worldviews. When you see King Kong again, and if you've seen the movie, do you think of gorillas crying? Do you think of the fact that gorillas feel terror or sadness? It encourages us to look differently at the world around us. It frames the debate, putting people at the center of the debate. If you're familiar with The Guardian, which is an English newspaper, a British newspaper, they have changed the way they're going to be showing images of the Anthropocene. And they no longer are showing shots of just burning things or destroyed things. They're putting people at the center of the debate, at the center of the issue. Because we may not recognize that we are causing it when here we live in America or our countries that are first world countries, but our actions actually cause problems for other people. So art allows us to bring people in and frame the debate in different ways. If you see a parrot sitting alone on a white sheet of paper, and you start to recognize that that parrot is endangered, you think we need to change how we behave. And it leads us to self-recognition. We need to see ourselves in the center of that discussion. We need to imagine ourselves in the world as part of a great big world, not a part of a local world, but a part of a large world where local impacts and local choices can have global consequences. Next slide. And importantly for art is it transforms society. It says to us, we need to do something. I can't be quiet anymore. I need to see that things that I have loved, things that I think are beautiful, things that I think are important. I need to do something about them. I need to care about them. So I had the good fortune to spend time with some of the artwork. And the one thing that struck me was with the Carrara marble image, is that I'm very aware of Carrara marble. I'm Italian, I love art. I'm Michelangelo, I love to know about the history of sculpture. And I looked at that image and I looked at the scale of humanity. If you have the chance to look at it, look for the ladder, look for the small table, and look at the scale of our actions on the world around us. But it also inspired the sense of hope and responsibility for me and care. If I see these things and I care about Carrara marble, and I care about parrots, and I care about gorillas, and I care about trees, I need to change my behavior. I need to transform myself and hopefully society around me. And ultimately, it's emotional learning. Emotional learning is critical. It stays with you. It sustains you. It's not I memorize that for a test, but it's something that stays with me, and I will do something about that because I care about it. And raise awareness, really critical. Art helps us to see, again, the world in a different way and says we need to do something about it, and it raises our awareness of how we need to think about our space and place in the world. And for the last slide, please. I want to stop with this quote from Bill McKibben, and I love the fact that the title of this article is "What the World Needs Now is Art, Sweet Art." And it really is what the world needs now, because we can see the hockey stick model. We can look at all the tables and charts we want, but what we need to look at is with our emotions and our imaginations. We need to look at the big blue marble and recognize we are on a spaceship surrounded by nothing. And this is what we have, and this is what we need to care about. And this is what art can do. This is the value of art in the Anthropocene. And I really give a lot of credit to the Zimmerli, the artist, and the sponsors for making sure that we recognize that art is really critical for us to reimagine our world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. That was fascinating. Really incredible images. I'm definitely going to go look for that article by Bill McKibben, who's just such a great thinker about all things climate change. So we're going to move now to Q&A panel. So please feel free to put questions in the Q&A at any point for our speakers. So joining us will be the co-curators of the exhibition. I will introduce them now. Austin Losada graduated from Rutgers in 2018 with a BA in art history and German. Currently as the Andrew W. Mellon postgraduate intern at the Zimmerli Art Museum, he aids in all aspects of exhibition planning and academic programming for the American Art Department. He is currently at work on Beauty Among the Ordinary Things, the photographs of William Armbruster, an exhibition that will investigate the impact of industrial growth and progressive politics on amateur artistic production during the Gilded Age in the United States. And Hannah Shaw is a PhD candidate at Rutgers, specializing in the history of photography. Her dissertation, August Sander and the Photographic Conditions of Nazi-Era Germany, considers how Weimar-era photographers and photographic strategies were integrated into the visual culture of National Socialism. As the graduate curatorial assistant within the Department of American Art at the Zimmerli, she has curated It's Just a Job, Bill Owens and Studs Terkel on Working in 1970s America, which was on view in 2018. And she co-curated Tiananmen Square in 1989, photographs by Kyang H. Hae, which was on view at the Zimmerli last year. And I will also, so if Mary, if you would join us as well. Let's see, I had just some thoughts. And well, first of all, actually, Austin and Hannah, I don't know if you have any kind of reflections on what Mary had to say. I thought it really kind of paired very, very nicely. So yeah, I'd love to hear if you guys have any reactions.
Yeah, sure. I think what Mary or Dr. Nucci said about sort of people coming to these artworks with their own interpretations is definitely true for all art. But a lot of the works in this exhibition, the intention behind the works are not ones that are often environmental critiques or sort of responses to our current ecological moment. But what Hannah and I did for the show was try to recontextualize them. When we put them together with all of the 13 other works in the show, they started to speak to certain
problems and realities we're currently facing. And so like the Boyle family work, they are entirely consumed by this idea of representing the world and these fragments of the ground extremely accurately, but in no way are they worried about sort of bringing to light sort of showing the earth using plastic materials or manufactured materials. But that's something that we sort of read into and sort of allowed us to place it in the show.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dr. Nucci. That was a very fascinating talk and definitely invigorating in terms of how we can sort of fight climate change and think about it more broadly. And I also sort of liked this idea that maybe sort of artistic representations can maybe subvert some of these preconceived notions people have about images they see of climate change, that people maybe who are less inclined to sort of see humans' involvement in nature maybe can be disarmed by a more artistic representation and kind of, sort of be able to access some more empathy than maybe their quick reaction to a photograph that they will sort of slot into their own worldview. So that's one of the things that I took away, and it's very, very fascinating. Thank you.
So Hannah, I actually have a question for you, because photography, and especially your kind of work with documentary photography, as Dr. Nucci's presentation shows, images can kind of shake off their original context, or maybe they get interpreted in a way that, as Mary says, is not reflective of the reality. So I'm curious, how you approach photography as an art historian, how you approach maybe some of the images in this particular exhibition, and whether their veracity does it matter, or is it the impact that matters? And actually, that's, I guess, kind of a question for both of you. If it drives people to action, do you think that that's kind of an acceptable use of those images? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a great question, and an eternal one with photography, which is a very obviously slippery medium that can be used in all these ways and be framed in different ways. We were really interested in this show and how sort of the aesthetic seductive nature of photography could be used as an effective method. Just as Dr. Nucci said, for the Bertinsky photograph, that's the only photograph in the show, that you first are sort of drawn in by the aesthetic geometric quality of it, and so you sort of engage with it and you're mesmerized by it, and then you begin to sort of think about what it means. But so we were kind of interested in how that the aesthetic quality of photography could bring you in more than even the documentary function. And then, the other piece that really draws on photography but doesn't have a photograph in it is Diane Burko's painting of a NASA satellite image. So again, it's this very seductive, beautiful image that is drawn from a photograph. It really brings you in because of these different aesthetic qualities, as Austin's tour said. So I guess we were kind of thinking about sort of maybe taking a step beyond this question of documentary and veracity to more sort of engage with those aspects that Dr. Nucci said of sort of empathy and sort of aesthetic appeal that comes with art, and that photography can really help us access, and sort of use that as the way in to sort of affect people over the question of, is this true in a documentary way, to sort of make them kind of feel something about it first, and have sort of photography sort of sharpness and the way that it can grab these unusual views of the earth, have that as kind of the photography's hook, rather than necessarily its sort of documentary function. That's sort of my feeling. What do you think, Austin?
I don't know if I can add much to that. I think that was great. I am really interested to hear what Dr. Nucci has to say, because I didn't know that most than half of the images you showed were kind of fake. So the dolphins in the Venice Canal, I didn't know that was a fictitious image. and the one about the polar bear, it's not due to climate change, but maybe due to an illness. Do those images have a place if they inspire action? And I'm guessing it's more complicated than that, but can you speak on that?
Sure. I think truth or veracity in imagery is always critical, but that doesn't mean that a false image does not have power to it. So, for example, that scientists use false coloring in their imaging, it's important because it highlights the information so that it's easier to read. So the images that you mentioned, Austin, it depends on who comes to the images. If it's somebody who is kind of on the fence about climate change or skews to the I don't believe or I don't accept that climate change is anthropogenic, it's going to be their position. And that's because the Anthropocene, climate change, global warming, I'm kind of lumping them all together, is so ideological in its acceptance of the data. Falsity and veracity becomes critical if you call out, if you have an image and it will support somebody who already strongly accepts the data, but it will then also cement somebody who doesn't accept the data. And so it all depends on who comes to it and how it's presented to them. If it's presented as, this is the daisy, for example, that's a normal daisy mutation. If that's presented as part of Fukushima's meltdown, someone's going to say, oh, look, they're trying to tell me a story. They're lying to me again. It's fake news kind of thing. So a lot of it depends on that. It also, and so, it's who comes to it. Are their actions? How is it presented to them? And, I don't think there's a problem with having a false image. If you said this is a false image, if it engages people. And that's, I think, Austin and I think what you're talking about, that as someone who works in science communication, is really critical, since it's difficult for people to understand science if they've not focused on it or they've left school. Engaging people, whether with color, so the Burko paintings, which is just absolutely, they're beautiful. And I may not know what it is, but I go, oh, I'll do the kind of, oh, that's so pretty. And I'm going to go look at it. But then when I go and I read the label, I go, oh my gosh, this is really tragic. And so art, if it can bring you in, but you can say why I'm doing this. I can say it's a painting, or I can say this is, what could happen if we have radiation or if it brings you in, as long as you tell people that, there's not a problem with it. But if it's used inappropriately, and it will cement perceptions in ways that will be much more difficult to change later on.
Excellent. So a question in the Q&A, how did the idea for the Anthropocene exhibition come about? And was it that you picked an image and developed an exhibition around it, or what was the process?
Sure. So anecdotally, I went to offsite storage one day, and we were flipping through the racks of different works that we have here at the Zimmerli, and we came across the Boyle family work, which was that fragment of a truck stop. And in person, the work is absolutely massive, and it's very sculptural. So while it sits on the wall, it sticks out, and it's lumpy, and you can really investigate the work. It has shards of glass and metal and all of these things that are actually not as they seem. And we both thought this work would be a great jumping off point to start talking about sort of human intervention in the landscape, or just in showing human intervention in artworks. And around the same time that we saw that work, we got that Robert Loeb angel piece, and they both work so well texturally to sort of engage the viewer to really look around the work instead of just looking at. And so that is what sort of inspired the show. Loeb is definitely an artist who uses art to talk about the current environmental moment. I know he has done monuments for Hurricane Katrina, sort of doing the same technique for sort of giant trees that have fell and sort of recontextualizing them in a different space. So that is sort of the origin of how we started this exhibition.
And maybe I'll just add that after that happened, we also realized how many recent acquisitions to the American department fell into the category of engaging with the natural world, and how that was kind of fascinating, how many new pieces dealt with that, and also how many artists really in our collection were engaging with that. So the Diane Burko painting and the Christie Rupp sculptures all recently came in. So we thought it was a great opportunity to think about how engaged in this question the Zimmerli's collection has become.
Excellent. So I'm curious, actually, so as you mentioned, this is really focused on American art. And Mary, I'm curious if you know, are there parallel kind of movements happening, globally? Are there, in China, it comes to mind, are there artists who are kind of informing the conversation, or the artworks there received in a similar way? Does it have the ability to kind of move the dial in any way? And there was a question that came in anonymously through the chat too, saying, are artists helping to change the conversation? Does art have the ability to change people's focus? So, we've kind of been talking about the American context, and if you're able to kind of push us out of that a little bit, I'd be very curious.
I definitely am not an expert on that, but I do know art is not, and it's terrible. Art doesn't always figure it into my talking about visualization, but I realized, and thank you everyone, this is going to change my teaching. So I'm going to incorporate much more of what's happening currently in the art communities for the students as well as myself. I am aware of several, there are many artists around the world who are working in this area. And I'm sure that they are helping to kind of change thinking. I'm going to just use one example where the problem with images and really climate change, because again, it's so ideological, and the Anthropocene, is that if we just look at America alone, there's been research that has looked at the fact that there are 6 Americas as regards climate change, from the absolute do not accept it to the absolute this is happening, the very concerned to the very not concerned. And basically, when we talk about changing people's minds and changing their behaviors, we're talking about, we've got the committed, we don't have to worry about them. And then we've got these people on the fence that are in the middle of this 6 Americas, the 6 groups. And maybe the ones who are I don't really accept it, but I'm not sure I'm going to say anything one way or the other. You want to focus on those. And what we're finding is that you can sway those people, but you have to sway them in a way that speaks to them. So remember I talked about that when you see an image, it connects to something you already know. You want to find a way to speak to them in their own context, is what's important to them. So someone who loves spiders and saw that, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the name right now, that very large spider is going to be very concerned to find out that's in danger, but someone who hates spiders may not do that. So I know artists are, I think one of the other values of art is that it becomes very specific to people. And you can because you can engage with it in different ways, because there are many meanings. You can be both subversive or accepting of it. It's such a great way to really move that dial. I don't know if anyone has done any research on actually seeing if that has happened, but I know that this is happening around the world, and there are many books and artists and compilations of artworks about climate change that people could go out and search for.
Excellent, thank you. No, it's really, one of the kind of phenomena in academia over the last several centuries is this kind of divorce of art and science. But we think back to the Renaissance and famously Leonardo da Vinci, for example, and they were absolutely intertwined, and 2 ways of exploring the world that were linked, not kind of divorced. And there has been kind of this separation that has been kind of reinforced through the academy, reinforced through class and elitism and things like that. And I really hope that we're kind of at a phase where through social media and other kind of forms we can kind of break through some of that, because I do think that there is as kind of the exhibition shows and as everyone has discussed today, there's a really important role in both for communicating, and just as there are, a spectrum of people and their reactions and beliefs to climate change, there's a spectrum of the way people interpret and kind of process information. And so some people are going to look at that graph and be moved by it, and other people are going to be moved by something that's maybe a little bit less, that gives them a picture that they can wrap their mind around in a different way and kind of sticks with them. And maybe the two of them together is really kind of the sweet spot. I'm not sure if they're still in operation, but there used to be a group called Cape Farewell that would run expedition cruises up into the Arctic Sea. And there were, Arctic researchers, scientists on these exhibitions, and then they would also invite musicians and artists and authors, people like Feist and Alexis Rockman, for example, I believe went on one of these expeditions as well. And recognizing that together is really kind of the path forward. So thank you. Does anyone have any concluding thoughts before we end this portion?
I think I'm good.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for a wonderful Q&A and really kind of a lot to think about. And, especially Mary, I'm going to think, I like Austin, I really was not, I hadn't seen all of those images before, but like the polar bear, obviously, that was probably one of the most viral images, and I hadn't really heard the after story. And so that's a kind of a good reminder too, to be moved, but also kind of check back and see, where the kind of the reality kind of comes out. So very good. Well, again, thank you very much for joining us. We have one last section of our program today. Sure, bring the slides back up. Move with the tech. All right, so now your turn to play. We have a creative challenge we've set up for our first Art Before and After Hours. Here's the challenge. You're going to make your own monument for the Anthropocene. So first, go on a scavenger hunt around your living space and find as many of the following as you can. An object that represents change, an object that is older than 10 years, an object that's older than 50 years, an object from nature or that's made of natural materials, an object that is unnatural, and you can interpret that as you wish, an object that will be consumed within a week, and an object that will be obsolete in 5 years or less. Using at least 4 of those objects, assemble some kind of monument for the Anthropocene, and again, interpret this challenge however you would like. A statement of some kind about the impact of humankind on the earth. Here is my example that I came up with from things around my kitchen. So the scissors represent change, my earbuds, which don't even work with my current phone, so they will be obsolete within 5 years, an apple that will be consumed within the week, my plastic that is unnatural, I will say, and 2 rocks there that are certainly older than 50 years. And so that's just one example you can play with. So enter to win. So snap a photo of your creation, email it to us at education@zimmerli.rutgers.edu, or you can tag us on Instagram at Zimmerli Art Museum. You can add a title or description for your work if you choose, and we'll judge the most creative entry, and that person will receive the Zimmerli prize package, including a free year of museum membership. Giving you 1 week, so we have to receive your entry by next Tuesday, October 13th, by the end of the day. And you can also find these instructions on our website. You can go to go.rutgers.edu/art-challenge. If you have any questions, you can also email us at the same address, education@zimmerli.rutgers.edu. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today for this program. It was really, really enjoyable, and I hope you all enjoyed it as well. I want to thank my colleagues at the Zimmerli and our friends at Rutgers Global who contributed to its success, including Connor Risi, Greg Costales, Catherine Roscoe, Lauren Forsman, and of course Rick Lee. And at the Zimmerli, Donna Gustafson, Austin Losada, Hannah Shaw, my colleagues Claire D'Amato and Carla Zarita, and Nicole Simpson and Kiki Michael. Just a reminder to please fill out that post-event survey. And if you don't already, follow us on social media at Zimmerli Art Museum, and don't forget to also follow at Rutgers.global. And we hope we'll see you again soon. So as Rick mentioned, there's Friendship Friday with Rutgers Global this coming Friday from either 9 a.m. or 4 p.m. And we would like you to save the date for the next Art Before/After Hours on December 1st. Please tell your friends we're doing this again at 7 o'clock tonight. So if they couldn't make it this morning, please let them know. They can tune in again this evening for another live program. And we hope you have a great day and stay well. Thank you very much, everyone.